YouTube, how the hell are you doing? It's Brian from Headstrong back here again having more positive conversations around mental health. Today what we're going to do is we are going to answer one of the biggest questions we ever get asked. Should I take medication for my mental health? This is a really interesting topic and one that many people ask, whether it's parents asking for their teenagers, whether it's people asking for themselves. And one of the things that they always say to us is, I don't want to take medication for my mental health. I don't want to become addicted, or I don't want to think that I've had to resort to medication, when actually sometimes medication isn't exactly the worst thing that you can do. And I know that sounds a little bit funny talking to somebody who's a therapist as a living, because you think that I should be sitting here just now saying to you, do you know what, never take medication, medication is bad. But actually that's not what I'm going to say at all. But there are a couple of things that you need to understand about medication so that you understand whether it's the right choice for you with where you are just now. So what I want to do is, I want to start off by telling you a little bit of a fairy story. Now, this isn't going to involve princes and princesses and dragons, although it'd be much more exciting if it did. I mean, you could imagine, I suppose, that a prince is trying to find his princess, or another prince, because ultimately, that's his prerogative. And as he's going along, you know, he experiences, I'm just not going to do it. It's just not going to work. I'm not going to be able to do it. Let's imagine now that somebody breaks their leg. Right. Not quite as happy as a prince, a princess and a dragon, but still an interesting place to go to in a mental health video. Anyway, so imagine that someone breaks their leg. And what happens is they go along to their doctor, and they say to their doctor, "Doctor, look at my leg, it's like this. And I don't think that it should be like that. I am pretty sure it should be something else, and it should be in a straight line like it normally is, but now it's a little bit squinty." And what the doctor says is, right, okay, no problem. Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you this plaster cast. We're going to get it nice and straight. And then what we're going to do is we're going to give you some painkillers, and then off you go. And let's see how it goes. What I want you to do is I want you to keep all of the weight off that leg. I don't want any damage to happen to it at all. So the person leaves and they follow their medical advice, because of course that's what you would do. So they go out there and they take their painkillers religiously. They have their big plaster cast on their leg, and there they sit and they tape all the weight off it. And then what happens is they go back to their doctor after, let's say, 4 or 5 weeks. And the doctor says, excellent. Now, let me just see what it feels like when you stand on that leg. Can we just remind you, that person has kept all weight off since they injured it 4 or 5 weeks ago. What happens is the person stands on their leg and they're like, oh, doctor, it's really sore. It's very, very painful when I put any weight on it at all. So what should I do? And the doctor goes, well, do you know what we're going to do? Is we're going to give you a stronger plaster cast and stronger painkillers. Here you go. Take even stronger painkillers. And what happens is you go away and they go, oh, and remember, just as you leave the office, keep all the weight off that leg. Don't put any weight on it now. We'll see you again in another 4 weeks. So you go out for another 4 weeks. You've injured your leg. It's now 8 weeks since you put any weight on your leg. You're taking your painkillers. You feel fantastic. You're like, wee. You've just spent a whole week on tramadol. Just like 4 weeks, just completely away with the fairies, to the point where now it doesn't really have any effect on you. But you think that's totally normal. Meanwhile, outside, everybody's looking, going, whoa, who's this person? And what happens is you go back to the doctor. They say, okay, I want you to put the weight on your leg, and you put the weight on the leg, and you go like that. No, it's really sore now. It's almost like it feels as if it's weakening, and it's just that I don't know what to do. And they go, do you know what? I know what we're going to do. I'm going to give you even stronger painkillers, and what I want you to do is I want you to go into this wheelchair. And what happens is they put them in a wheelchair and they put the leg up and they say, don't put any weight on it at all. Don't want you even try and walk. And then when you go back, and you go back after 4 weeks and you try it again, and you're like, and this goes on. Now, what you could imagine is that eventually what happens is this person ends up in traction. So in a hospital bed, lying with their leg up in the air that's slowly withering away because they've not exercised it, on stronger and stronger painkillers, with everybody sitting puzzling going, I don't know why it's not getting any better. Now, this is our problem with medication for mental health. You see, actually all along there, it actually wasn't the plaster cast or the painkillers that were ever going to make a difference. They weren't a cure. They were doing nothing to be able to build the muscle back up, to strengthen the bone, to make sure the bone knits. All they were doing was holding things in place and taking a bit of the pain away. And this is exactly what antidepressants do. However, if I break my leg, let's hope that doesn't happen to me, you, or anybody that we know. If we break our leg, I'm adding you in here. It's not now if I break my leg, it's if we break our leg. I'm not breaking my leg on my own. If I'm going to break my leg, then you've got to break your leg too. That's just part of the deal. That's just the way it goes. But if either of us were to break our leg, then if we went to the hospital, then we'd look for painkillers. We want a plaster cast. But the bit that was missing out of my little story that we just went through was the physiotherapy. Was the bit where basically you go along to someone and you go, my leg's feeling really sore, and some well-meaning, lovely person, normally with big muscles, you never find that physios, it doesn't matter whether man, woman or whatever, but they just always look really fit and healthy. That might just be the physios that I've met before. And what they do is they turn around to you and go, I know it's sore. And what I want you to do is I want you to put your foot down and I want you to try and take a step. And you go, but it's really sore. And they go, I know it's going to be sore. But let's try and take maybe 5 steps. Let's see how we go. And you take 5 steps and you're like sore and they're painful. But you do them and you feel great at the end of it. And you go, I took 5 steps. They're the first 5 steps I've taken in about 4 weeks. And they go, good, that means that your leg is getting stronger. And then you go back the next week and they go, right, want you to take 10 steps. And then you take 20 steps. And then you take 40 steps. And then you're walking for 5 minutes. Just, you're not great at it, but you're definitely walking around and you're getting better. And then by the time you go back to the doctor after 5 weeks, 6 weeks, 10 weeks, whatever it is, they're going, you don't need those painkillers anymore. I'm going to take that cast off. I'm going to take that bandage off. I'm going to take that support bandage off. Because actually you've managed to build your leg up enough that it's actually strong again. And then what do? You skip down the road going, my goodness, my leg is healed. And this is the bit that nobody does. So let's look at medication. Just through the lens of that story, let's look at what I mean about that with medication. So the most common type of antidepressant medication that you're going to get these days is an SSRI, or a selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor, which is a really interesting name. Can I just state at this point, very, very important to say, I am not a medical doctor. I am giving you knowledge that I've just gained over experience of doing and working with clients, as well as speaking to doctors and medical people. I am not a medical person, so I can't give you medical advice. I am just giving you an opinion here on what happens. The other type of medication that sometimes people are diagnosed for their mental health, now there's a whole heap of other SS something I's and things, but they're a little bit rarer. But the other one is a beta blocker, and that's where I want to start. So what do we mean by a beta blocker? Okay, so a beta blocker is something like propranolol, and what it's normally given for is it's normally given for anxiety. So if you go to your doctor and you say, I'm a little bit anxious, then they'll give you something like propranolol or some other tranquilizer like beta blocker. Sometimes if your anxiety is really bad, you might even get something like Valium, which is an exceptionally strong tranquilizer. And what these things do is that they slow your heart rate, they lower your blood pressure, and they take away many of the physical symptoms of how you feel. I remember working once with a lady who had a flying phobia. Now, she'd actually just flown over from Australia. She actually came from Scotland, where I'm based just now. But she was living in Australia and she'd flown back to visit family. And she wanted to go over her flying phobia before she flew back. And when I spoke to her, I said, but you've just flown for like 24 hours. And she said, yes. My doctor prescribed me really strong Valium. And I'm like, oh, right. I was like, well, how was it then? Did it work? And she said, well, I was still terrified. I just couldn't be bothered doing anything about it. And that really sums up people's experience of things like beta blockers and stronger tranquilizers, is that actually your mind is still racing. All the same thoughts are there. It's just that you can't manifest the same physical sensations in your body. Now, to some people, this can be a blessed relief, because one of the things that happens about anxiety, and we cover this in the video that I've done on anxiety, so you can check, hopefully there's a wee box around here, or there will be at the end, and check out our channel where you'll find that video, What is Anxiety? And when somebody's feeling anxious, quite often when they have physical symptoms, they can get stuck in loops. Now, what I mean by a loop is that the physical symptoms actually make the person anxious even more. So they get anxious about being anxious. So as soon as the anxiety begins, it's like, oh my God, look, I'm anxious. And that makes them worried because they worry about where that anxiety might go because they know what it feels like. And in that, it starts to loop around on itself. So having a little bit of an escape from those physical symptoms can, for some people, be an incredible feeling, and then they can deal with the mind things. But here's the thing that goes back to my broken leg metaphor. If you do not deal with the mind stuff, all that you're doing is you're covering the anxiety up. It's still there. All that you're doing is that it's not quite being able to kick into full action. So therefore, that means you become reliant on the drug. The only way that you can possibly deal with your anxiety is to take propranolol or to take Valium. And for me, that's not how life's meant to be. I don't believe that you're broken if you're feeling anxious, but it can be good for a short-term fix. Make sense? Okay, so that's like beta blockers and tranquilizers. And what they do, they take away the physical symptoms, but the mental symptoms may remain behind them. Sometimes, if we can break the loop, then actually we realise that it was the physical symptoms that were causing the mental symptoms. And sometimes for some people, not massively common, but for some people, it can be the thing that breaks the cycle of anxiety and actually helps them start to get back out of it again. But for just now, that's tranquilizers and beta blockers. Let's have a look now at these SSRI antidepressants. Okay, first of all, how does an SSRI work? Well, as I said earlier, I am not a doctor. I've not studied these medically, so I'm going to give you a very basic understanding. Serotonin is a chemical that gets released inside your brain, in fact, inside your body, and it's quite often called one of your feel-good chemicals. There's other ones like dopamine, like melatonin, all of these different things as well that make you feel good, calm, all these great feelings. But serotonin is one of the principal things that is involved in principal hormones and neurotransmitters that is involved in making you feel happy, making you feel good. Now, the way that your system normally works is when serotonin is released into your mind, it actually gets reabsorbed by your body, and your nerves like take it back. And then what they do is they recycle it into other things, and it's like a cycle inside your head. Now, what an SSRI does is it stops the reuptake. It inhibits the reuptake of that serotonin, meaning that you have more serotonin in your brain and in your system, so therefore you can feel better for longer. What we find is that when people are feeling a bit depressed, when people are feeling anxious, is that serotonin basically goes into the system and disappears like really, really fast. So if we can have it hanging about a little bit longer, then it can keep people feeling better for longer. Are they tranquilizer? Well, they have tranquilizing effects to some people. Some people will say that they do have, but that's not principally how they're working. So, once we know what they do, are they useful to take? Well, here's my point on them. Sometimes what people need is they need to steady the ship. And there's so much out there about you shouldn't take medication and the medication's bad. But as I said earlier on with the broken leg thing, if I break my leg, do you know what I want? I want painkillers and I want a plaster cast to stop my leg bone from going like this and doing horrible things. If you've got a horrible image in your mind, I've just made myself feel all funny just doing that. If you imagine like the bone, can you imagine? Like imagine that. You wouldn't want that. So therefore what you want is a big plaster cast to hold everything in place so it's held rigid. And then while your body does what it needs to do, what you want is some sort of tablet to take the pain away. Now, ultimately for me, this is what an SSRI or an antidepressant is doing for your mind. All it's doing is holding everything together. So going back to my metaphor earlier about the leg, if you don't do physio, then all that's happening is that everything's being held in place, but nothing's actually getting stronger or better. The thoughts that you've had in your head that have caused you to feel down, depressed, whatever it is, originally are still there. You're still feeling sad about the thing that's happened, the thing that's happening, or the thing that might never happen out there. If you watch our video on what is depression, then you'll find me talking about this. That actually what depression is like you've lost the light at the end of the tunnel. It's like you look out and at the end of the tunnel and there's nothing there. And that just puts you into this big thing of, I call it a big attack of the why bothers. Like, why bother? Why should I? Like, why put all that effort into changing if all that's going to happen is crap is going to happen? If you've not watched that What is Depression video, then please do. There's an amazing story in there about a study that's a bit funny that was done in the 1970s about learned helplessness, but this is where these things come from. The thing about all of these things is that they're thought-based. They're happening inside your head. If you've watched anything that we've done so far, you'll understand that we understand that mental health is an inside-out process, not an outside-in process. And therefore, sometimes medication, what it does is it can steady the ship, but you have to be dealing with what's inside your head. What I therefore call that is physiotherapy for the mind. Now, what do I mean by that? I mean that you go for some therapy. If you're worried about going for therapy, again, I know I keep pointing you to other videos, but mental health is something that you have to study before you do it. We've got an amazing video on what are all the different types of therapy that you can go for. Well, I'll take you through each one, tell you the pros and cons, because not all therapy is the same. So if you're sitting here going, but I've tried therapy, it didn't work, you've not tried them all. And even then, I think I only cover 5 or 6 of them. And there's so many more different types of therapy. You just have to find the one that works. So what am I saying about medication? What I'm saying about medication is that it's not always a bad idea. In fact, quite often, it's actually quite a good idea to steady the ship. It holds you together, it keeps you feeling safe, it removes the physical symptoms, which can be sometimes an amazing relief. But, and this is a big but, you then have to be going for some sort of physio, some sort of therapy, coaching, something like that to work yourself through the actual thing that's causing your depression, your anxiety, or whatever it is. To put it a little bit more simply, it's just not a cure. The medication is fantastic, but a bit like that plaster cast and a bit like the painkillers, it's not actually helping anything. What you need is that physio. As we always say at the end of these videos, if we at Headstrong can help you at all, then please get in touch with us through any channel you want. All our various contact details are coming up in just a little second. Make sure you hit subscribe. Please share this video with anybody you think that it will help. And for just now, thanks very much for watching. I'm Brian from Headstrong. I'll be back with you soon with more positive lessons on mental health. See you soon. Bye.